Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being your show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lincoln Rhyme. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. A very interesting cold open to the episode. Obviously, like, this woman ends up hearing a scream and she goes to investigate. She sees in a room that there's a chair with ropes and blood and someone peels off in a car. Obviously, she ends up calling the cops. She had found like a necklace with like the letter L, and well, it looked like a part of like a charm from like a necklace that's a letter L. She calls the cops, but the cops come, but it's like, lady, there's nothing here. And she's like, wait, what? But the blood's cleaned up, everything's going. She's like, no, it's because it's making it seem like she's crazy. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So that sets off this episode because it turns out that L belongs to a girl named Lucy who disappeared 5 years ago. In particular, this is a very important case to Toledo because for him, it's like he's always kind of he hoped that she was still alive, but they were never able to find her. And obviously Lincoln kind of says, like, maybe I could have helped you back then. But obviously at that time he was so focused on going after the bone collector. But Toledo's like, no, this is on me. Like, I must have missed something. And so they proceed to investigate. Now, what's really interesting, too, is when they start asking questions around the neighborhood, because it's like a little kind of like Russian community. It's like, no one's talking. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Because it's not the whole thing of like, oh, we don't trust cops, we're not talking. They're actively halting the investigation. It's like everywhere we go, it's like, wait, what? It's like, it's almost like people are straight up lying to our faces about certain things. It's like, oh yeah, that scream, that's because this particular person in the neighborhood saw a rat and screamed. Oh yeah. I was like, oh, you're about to wake the whole neighborhood. And so that went down. They met these two parents and their daughter. Their daughter was like, we didn't hear anything last night. I immediately was like, they didn't even ask you that yet, and you've already answered. And they talk about it too. It's like, we didn't even ask her yet, and she already jumped on. It's like, so why is this community actively turning against? All right, let's go to the original witness. She's like, yeah, sorry, I wasted your time. It's like, even she gotten to. So I'm like, dude, I was like, what is going on in this? Because that was a big thing. Like, why is no one talking? Like, something went down. Like, maybe someone's in danger because they're looking for Lucy. So they're thinking like, hey, maybe this has something to do with Lucy. So it's like someone's life is in danger. So obviously they want to try and look into this. But I thought that was such a fascinating element of like what's going on here, because my mind immediately started racing. Like, all right, is this like some kind of like mafia thing of like maybe there's like some mafia group or something that exists in that community that's telling them you keep your mouth shut or you die type of situation. I was wondering if it was something like that, but obviously over the course of the case we learned there's a lot more complexities to it, because obviously they try to find the car that was seen, but it's like, oh no, this dude, it's like, no, I owned a different car. The one dude that does own the car, what does he say in the interrogation? It's like, oh yeah, she screamed because she saw red. He's like, yeah, and Toledo's like, yeah, let me guess, it was, you told her I was enough to wake the neighborhood. It's like everyone's literally following the same script. And so it's like, okay, what's up with that? Amelia goes to check out where the car was, but it wasn't like, oh, it was stolen that night. There was fresh soil, like it was still there. And the little girl ended up and she comes over and I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. I did not expect her to spill her coffee or whatever on it. I was like, what? Once again, I'm like, that just threw me, because I'm like, you are so actively halting, and I was trying to understand why. Everyone was trying to understand why, but getting the soil samples, it was able to lead them to this facility. And then there's this little thing of like bread and water. I forgot what Lincoln had called it. It's something, an icon. Basically, it's meant to be like a burial thing for like the dead, of like, give them bread and water kind of on their way to the afterlife type of situation. So it's like, oh, that means someone here is dead. And obviously Toledo's kind of taking this hard, because I thought it was so interesting, because obviously this case is very important to Toledo, because it's like, because he blames himself for not being able to find something back then. And I thought it was interesting because he had told the parents not to get their hopes up, but it's like, you don't have to worry about us getting our hopes up, because we never lost hope. We've always been hopeful. She's been around. And Toledo was like, I was so concerned about them not getting their hopes up, I didn't account for myself. I have been, basically hoping for the past 5 years that maybe she was out there somewhere, that she was okay, that she was still alive. And he was like, that's an amateur mistake. Because it's that thing of like, you got to keep your own, like, you want to keep the parents' hopes in moderation. You want to keep yours in line and check as well. But obviously Amelia's like, the fact of the matter is hope isn't a bad thing. It shouldn't be considered, a bad thing, because obviously she's still, new to this whole situation. But it's that thing of like, I think in the end, you don't want to be jaded. You don't want to just kind of assume the worst. You want to be hopeful, because I'm sure just going through this job, being negative about it, it can take its toll. But luckily, it turns out the body, they do find a body, but it's not hers, it's someone else's. It's a dude named Max. And so it's like, okay, so all right, they look into Max, and then the interesting thing is, it's like, okay, so who is he? Like I said, so many pieces start falling into place in this particular case. They go through his place, and it, they find Lucy's uniform. So it's like, okay, so Lucy definitely was here. So it's like, so Max is the one who kidnapped her, but someone ended up killing him, because it's like they must have found out that he was holding Lucy. But then it's like, well, if that's the case, then where's Lucy? This isn't making any sense. And the little table or whatever he had made that was in the center, like they ended up opening it up and found a body inside, but obviously it wasn't Lucy's. I mean, it was the body was too tall to be Lucy's. But the interesting thing is, because they started piecing this whole thing together, that basically it turns out that basically the community have come together, because they basically end up figuring out the little girl who had the bruise on her face, who's helped covering up the crimes and stuff like that. She was almost, Max came there to kidnap her, because they start realizing, like, okay, looking into it, this lady was a I think her name was Jamie. She was the previous person. Like, so basically Max kidnaps people because he was, a sicko, and kids were his thing. And the moment they became too old, as in turning 21, he found a new replacement and killed the old. So that's what ended up happening in Jamie's case. He had kidnapped Lucy and killed Jamie. Well, the thought process then becomes, well, that little girl, he tried to kidnap her, but she probably got away. She fought back, told her parents, and they, kind of did some community justice and came together to deal with him. But things kind of got out of hand, and he ended up dying. And so that's what that became about. That's why the two people that were leaving, like, why the woman was crying, like, mortified because of what they did. But I guess the moment, it makes you wonder, because, like, there was a couple minutes in between. I guess she had walked away from the house long enough for, like, everyone else in the community to come there and clean the place up. Or maybe they were already in there and they were already cleaning the place up while she was away and kind of snuck out. I mean, it is a small neighborhood, so all they had to do was sneak around the back, and they probably could have, because she was probably out, Gabby, the original witness, probably was out front the entire time. But it was so like, I would have never suspected that the story would be like that. And that's why the entire community was so tight-lipped about it, because none of them wanted to kind of go to jail for this situation, because they thought, like, oh, we murdered someone. I mean, he was a terrible human being. But it's like they end up sitting down with them and talking to them, because it's like no one's going to get in trouble. Just like they might have information about Lucy that maybe they don't even know. Because the thing is, at the time, they didn't know he had already kidnapped another girl, because basically the father had said, like, when they were interrogating him, hit him, he was like, okay, she's at a I would have taken her to a graveyard or whatever. And they interpret that as like, oh my God, he was going to kill our little girl, not realizing, like, he was kind of giving them some truth, because the fact of the matter is because they didn't know Max's process is to basically keep girls until he finds a new replacement. Once they grown up, he'll find a replacement and then get rid of her. He doesn't just straight up, but they thought, like, oh, he's going to take our girl and going to kill her. I mean, granted, it's not like him kidnapping her is it's better in the sense that she'll be alive, but obviously the terrible situation is, for one, the previous girl ends up dying, but also at the same time someone being, like, held hostage like that for so long and everything. And so it's like I said, it's not like a win-win, but obviously it's like like I said, so it's like, okay, so they start piecing it together, trying to find out what cemetery, and luckily they were able to ultimately find Lucy. And obviously you can tell for Salito it means a lot, because, like, he'd held out hope. I mean, because it's a sad thing at the end of the day, Jamie, obviously that sadly there was no happy ending for her story, but at the very least, her parents get to know. That's the only silver lining to this situation, because obviously not knowing is the worst thing. So at least her family gets to know, like, what happened, and now they know that the man responsible for it is gone, and, he'll never do it to anyone else's family, so. But it was interesting. The main dude had ended up, the one that was kind of being the main suspect of being the one that killed Max, he had left town, but the older lady that Salito had talked to earlier in the episode ended up being like, yeah, I'm the one, here's the knife, this is the murder weapon, I'm the one that did it, no one else was there. So obviously, it's like, did she actually do it? No, but she's covering for the rest of the community because she's probably like, she's probably like older, she probably thinks like, well, I don't really have any family, everyone else has their lives ahead of them, I'll take responsibility for it. I'm older, like I don't have much life to, like she might be thinking that, but it's like, Erica's like, would they actually, will a judge actually do that? Like, send an old lady to jail? Which Alito's probably like, nah, for taking out a predator like Max, they'll probably give her a medal. So I think things might lean more favorable in her situation because she is older. Maybe not. Depends on how the whole system works. But like, I just thought that was such a fascinating. Like I said, no one wanted things to kind of escalate to that, but it's just it turned because of the whole circumstances of people thought like, oh, you're going to take her and kill her. Just emotions kind of got flared. But like I said, just things just completely got out of control. So. And I think, because Gabby was kind of new to the neighborhood, so she didn't know. Well, for one, she probably didn't know ahead of time what was up, but then they informed her, and it's like, oh, okay. So she didn't want them to get in trouble too, knowing like, oh, this guy was a bad guy, so it's not like he's a bad guy. So like, there's no worrying about that, So that's why everyone tried to cover it. And like I said, I thought that was such a fascinating element to this episode. So there's that. Then there's an interesting side of this dealing with the bone collector. Obviously, confirming like, Kate had run some tests to confirm, like, comparing this to like what Lincoln had got sent years ago, that this is still in fact done the same exact way, that this is in fact a message from the bone collector. And obviously it's the complicated thing of like, well, now the bone collector knows not only where Amelia lives, because obviously her sister lives with her too, which Amelia's still dealing with the whole fact of like, oh, my sister got kidnapped by a serial killer. And on top of that, like, she's worried because like, obviously Rachel wants to go to like a Fall Out Boy concert. And she's like, oh, like, are you ready for that? And she's like, yeah, because she can't, live the rest of her life in fear. So she's willing to kind of, go out there, because it's like, she's like, he can't hurt me anymore because he's dead. So it's like Amelia's kind of willing to kind of give her, that space to do that until this kind of clicks in her head. And obviously she doesn't want to tell her sister about it, which even, Lincoln was kind of like, what was it he had said? He was basically like, don't get too caught up in it. Like a serial killer knowing your address, you'll get adjusted to it. And she's like, that's not something normally you're supposed to just kind of get adjusted to and get used to and kind of accept. That's just not normal. That you're not supposed to be scared of that, because Claire is like, I'm scared of it. But the fact of the matter is that changes when Amelia's like, wait, this is a picture of your family. You said you didn't have any family. Like, you lied. Oh, they don't live here. They're in Chicago. So you're telling me everything's kind of okay with my sister, like a serial killer knowing my address, but the fact is your family's safe somewhere else. So like, I don't get that. But he says like his situation is complicated, and we got more into that complicated situation. The lady is his ex-fiance, and obviously that is his son. But the thing is, when basically he had told her like everything's fine, everything's okay, until she got the letter from the bone collector, because like that meant the bone collector knew exactly where they lived. He didn't tell his family to leave, to be somewhere else, to be safe. She took their son and left on her own, because for her, she's like, I can't believe you. Because the fact of the matter is, we didn't really get into the ins and outs of what that really means. I'm interpreting that as you kept such crucial information as like a serial killer knows where we live. I'm talking about me and our son. The fact of the matter is, you should have told me something like that, because it's like we could have prepared. This isn't just our lives in danger. This is our son's. So it was like, I can't trust you. I can't trust your judgment, because the thing is, and this is how I interpret it, is as we know, Lincoln is very narcissistic. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room. Obviously, these years and his condition has tempered him. But I think, because of especially probably earlier days in that bone collector investigation, he thought like, nah, I don't have to tell my family, I'll protect them, don't worry. Well, for one, you're trying not to make them worry, but you're like, no, I can protect them, I'll look after them. But also he might be, the argument could be like, well, you think you're so smart enough that you'll get the bone collector without suffering the ramifications, that your family will never be in danger. I think all of that culminated and made his fiance be like, I gotta leave. So, I mean, granted, it's like, it's for the sake of them, but also it's just like, I can't be around you. no relationship should be, founded on a lie. And so obviously, because once again, they didn't even get married, they were engaged. He was like my ex-fiance. So I was like, that's interesting, and kind of understanding like that, and it does add this interesting element to it. And so for Lincoln, it's like, I get it, Amelia, you want to protect your sister, you need to tell her the truth, because the truth is actually going to, it might suck, but the truth, it means more. It would mean more coming from you rather than her finding out on her own. But sadly, at the end of the episode, Amelia doesn't tell her sister, because her sister kind of felt like, you can't just like put like all your work stuff on me. Like, granted, I shouldn't have said what I said, being like, you're not my mom, but it's like, because she recognizes everything Amelia does is to protect her. That Amelia loves her, and the fact that she's just worried about it. But for Rachel, it's like, well, I'm just gonna, but. Maybe Rachel would move differently if she knew, but at the same time, Amelia wants her to be able to live her life without fear. And it's like, because having that information is just going to terrify her, and she's always going to potentially be on edge. If not, it means, and even if it's not just that, it means that maybe her sister might have to move somewhere else. But obviously, she wants her sister nearby, because it's like, well, because we don't know the full scope of their family. Like, do they have any grandparents or something that, Rachel could go live with? Probably. But obviously, Amelia, like, she loves her sister, so she wants her nearby. So, but it's that thing of like, are you doing more harm than good? Your sister was already taken by one serial killer, and this is a serial killer that hasn't been caught. You don't know anything about him. You don't know who he is, and he loves games. Like, you could be doing more harm than good. So, Amelia's, and I think sadly it is going to come back to bite her. Like, Rachel might be pissed at, like, you didn't tell me about this and everything, so it's going to be interesting to see what ends up becoming of this. And speaking of the Bone Collector, we had that interesting side where his wife, Daniela, had introduced her friend Jade. And it's like, oh, she's so fascinated in your work and stuff like that. He's like, oh, yeah. She's like, yeah, he used to work with the cops. And Jade's like, oh, my God, I find your work so fascinating. She's like, I've listened to all these true crime things and stuff like that. I love to get a look at your work. And he's like, no, it's private stuff and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, well, I might just sneak in while you're away. Ha, 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 ha. And it's like, ha, 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 ha. Then cut till later. Danielle being like, oh my God, Jade's missing. Her car and stuff were found. Like, oh my God, I can't believe something happened to her. He's like, no, it's okay. I'm like, wow, you really got her just because she was jokingly being like, oh, I might break into your place. I think for him, it's like, I guess he's so paranoid. He's like, oh, I can't take the chance. That just seems so interesting. I guess maybe, I don't know. I guess because maybe it's because like, his situation's different now, because that also depends on how long him and Daniela met. Maybe they met in that 3-year period where he wasn't well, no, because she obviously knew him beforehand, because she talked about the fact is he's getting back into his work. So it seemed like, I don't know, maybe it's a thing of like when they first, like, that's what I'm trying to figure out the time frame, because I was wondering, not less Danielle is after he had already stopped in that 3-year period. Or was it like, so? But the fact that she said that makes it seem like they go back a ways of like she knew him beforehand, and then obviously noticed a change of like, oh, when you went on break from your work, but it's good to see you back happy again with your work. But it could just be like, oh, in that time we were together, you weren't really happy, but oh, you're doing your work, so that means you're happy. It depends on how the whole time frame works. But I just thought that was interesting. I mean, I guess it's like, well, you were looking for another victim to potentially use, so it's like, oh, 2 birds with 1 stone, get an annoyance out of the way while also having a victim on. So I doubt he's had time to kill her. Probably has her stashed away somewhere, but I'm like, that she might actually, well, I think the probably ironic thing is that she probably got what she had wanted to get inside of his facility, and then like now you're in there as a victim in the whole situation. So I like I said, I just thought that was such an interesting reaction of like him doing that. I feel like the normal thing would be like, oh, she's joking, haha. But I guess it's like, I can't take any chances that you might not be joking, so I've got to kind of jump on this quick. So that's really interesting. I'm curious to see where all of this in general takes us going forward into the next episode. Sorry, but really that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.